guys. Great to see you. I hope you're all doing well writing your rough drafts and studying for the midterm coming up on Thursday. It's hard to believe we're halfway through the semester. You've done an awesome job so far, and I'm so proud of you for sticking through this. I know it's not easy. I want to talk to you about the phrases that we learned in Unit 8 for contrast. And so today we're going to be talking about, should we review? We've been over these a number of times in class. We're going to be talking about subordinators and transition words that show contrast. Subordinators and transition words. And so please remember, if it's a subordinator, it introduces a dependent clause. And if it's at the beginning, it needs a comma. Okay, and so we'll have our subordinator plus our dependent clause, comma, independent clause, period. Or if it comes in the middle, we'll have our independent clause, our subordinator, and our dependent clause. All right, so let's talk about some of these subordinators, and these are going to be actually at the beginning here on page 116. All right, and so these are there are two different types. So remember in class we said, first we need to decide, is it a subordinator or is it a transition word? And that is dependent on the sentence structure and the clause, okay? Is it introducing a dependent clause or not? If it is a subordinator, then we have two types. We have direct contrast, which means I'm really just showing how two things are in opposition, or we have what we call surprising result. And in your book, they call this concession. They call this concession. And so these are the two different types that we're going to be looking at. So we need to know, first of all, is it a subordinator? If it follows these rules, then we have two different types of meaning. So we'll start with direct contrast. Direct contrast, we talked about the subordinators will and whereas. And these two both show direct contrast. I have brown hair while my sister has blonde hair. I have class on Tuesday while Krista has class on Monday. They have the same meaning and they both show direct contrast. Now we also talked about in this section, sometimes we do use a comma here only to show emphasis. I will never tell you on that. It's just to show emphasis. So you might see a comma before while and whereas to show extra emphasis. All right, so those are our direct contrast subordinators. Now let's talk about surprising result. And these should be pretty familiar to you guys. You've learned them for a long time. And these are although, even though, and though. And I saw a lot of you guys in our class time trying to use them as a transition word. These are not transition words. They're subordinators. They introduce a dependent clause, okay? A dependent clause, which is a subject plus a verb, a dependent clause. So although I studied all night, comma, I still failed the test. Even though I slept 8 hours, I'm still tired. Okay, so remember it has two phrases with the dependent clause, comma, and then our independent clause. So although, even though, and though. So do not use semicolon with these. Okay, we need commas, and they introduce two, and we need two different clauses, Okay, so these are on page 116 and 117. Now let's take just a minute. We'll flip over to the next section that we're talking about. And these are transition words and prepositions. Transition words and prepositions. And these transition words and prepositions are unique, right? They have their own rules. A transition word comes usually at the beginning of a sentence, followed by a comma, and then an independent clause. Or we use it with in between a semicolon. Okay, so we have a couple of transition words that are really useful. You might know these already. However, okay, that's a transition word. If it comes between two phrases, two clauses with a capital and a comma, and we have on the other hand, comma. Okay, and just as a note, these are showing direct contrast. I have brown hair. However, my sister has blonde hair. I have brown hair. On the other hand, My sister has blonde hair. Okay, so these are for direct contrast. And then we also talked about the phrase just in contrast, comma. All right, these are transition words. Now we do also have, oh, wait, one more, sorry, on the contrary. So please remember, as I'm writing them all, keep it with a comma. It comes at the beginning of a sentence, and it's a transition word. We do have one preposition in this group. It's in contrast to. And remember, preposition is always followed by a noun. Okay? In contrast to my sister, comma, coming to this side. In contrast to my sister, comma, I am very tall. It's not true, but in contrast to, Michigan is very cold. Okay, so we're going to have a comma that comes after our noun when we have in contrast. All right. Now we also talked about concession or surprising result. All right, and so these are similar in meaning to although, even though, and though, but these are transition words and prepositions, okay? These are transition words and prepositions. So with surprising result, we have a couple of phrases, nevertheless, and nonetheless. These are both transition words. You may have never used them before. They're really easy to use. They come at the beginning of the sentence, and they show a surprise. I studied all night. Nonetheless, I didn't do well on the test. I slept 8 hours. Nevertheless, I'm still tired. Both of these show surprise result, and they are transition words. So they have a capital and a comma, or we can use it with the semicolon. And then we had a little bit of talk about despite and in spite of. Both of these are prepositions, so I'm going to put them here in our list. They are followed by a noun, and then the comma comes after. And a lot of times with these prepositions, we have the gerund or the ing form of the noun. Despite being very cold outside, comma, I didn't wear my coat. Despite, in spite of studying all night, comma, I still didn't do well. So with both of these, you'll often see the ing gerund, okay? One last one that we talked about is instead and instead of. Instead and instead of. Instead of course, being our preposition, and instead being our transition word. These are a little harder to understand the meaning. It is replacing one idea with another, right? Replacing one idea with another. I normally make my breakfast. Instead, I bought breakfast, okay? I normally go to bed at 8. It's not true. Instead, I went to bed at 11. All right, so these are used for replacing one idea with another. This is all in your textbook. Like I said again, page 116 to 121. Please go back, take a look at those, and get some good practice with the homework.